back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are the Commander staples that I am currently taking out of my decks. I made a video about this a couple months ago, and this is a little bit of a continuation from that. I sort of did that video on a whim, and I was pretty pleased with the outcome because I sort of got into a lot of different important topics in the format other than, like, why do you guys care about certain cards I'm taking out of my deck? You probably don't, but it's a combination of we're just getting so much stuff and I'm trying to find room for it in my decks. And here's the cards that I got to take out. And sometimes it's some of these Commander staples that were just auto includes for me for the longest time. And now it's like, man, I got some tough choices to make, but it's also a power creep thing, right? And in particular, just with the last set alone, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, I got a few cards that now stuff's getting pushed out, right? So specific cards I'm taking out of my decks, and yes, I do actually mean I've bought cards recently from, all the recent sets we've gotten. And I sit down and I'm like, okay, how do I fit this in? These are actual physical cards I have taken out of my decks that I'm going to be talking about, but more specifically, the reasons why. So let's get to it. And I'm going to start out with the Memorial Land series, which came out in the original Dominaria and was, I think it pretty quickly became a Commander staple-y, right? And I don't think I covered any lands in the last video, but this is another issue. Again, they just keep coming out with more and more utility lands and lands that are doing lots of different things. And it's starting to push stuff like this out. These were auto includes for me for the longest time. Memorial to Glory, just put that in any deck. I mean, it's still good, I guess, if you're in a soldier deck or maybe a token theme, but most of these lands, there's one of each color. They enter the battlefield tapped, they give you that color, and then they have some just nice ability, nothing crazy, but it's just some nice ability that you can use, and all stuff that is good in any game, whether it being drawing cards or destroying lands or Memorial to Folly, which is the one that I just took out of my Name is One deck, which returns a creature from your graveyard to your hand, which I thought that was a good fit there. It was an extra good fit because I'm in a little bit of a lands theme there where I can play it again from my graveyard, but I already got a lot of non-basic lands, utility lands, stuff like that in that deck, and it was a really tough choice. Tomb Fortress was the one, right? So again, I don't know if you call it a power creep thing, but to me, there's just a better option for what, a similar effect, but just a better option. I could put Memorial to Folly in my deck, but Tomb Fortress just seems way better, right? So maybe this is a power creep situation. For me, I don't think I'm playing any of these lands anymore. And again, they were, I don't know if I would say auto include, probably in monocolored decks, they were auto includes for me because you have a lot more room for lands that both enter the battlefield tapped and for utility lands. You have a lot more room for lands like that in monocolored decks. I think I am no longer playing any of these cards. There's just too many better options. All right, let's talk about Lightning Greaves. That's right. I'm getting some heavy hitters in this video, I got to tell you. I talked about a few in the last video, but here I'm really getting into some serious Commander staples. And of course, Lightning Greaves is, I imagine it's still the most popular equipment in the entire format, I think. It used to be pretty expensive when I first started playing. It's been reprinted into oblivion, so I don't think it's so much anymore. Like now we're still hovering around like $4, but it's been reprinted like 2 or 3 times a year for like the last 4 or 5 years. It is particularly good, because you can obviously equip it for free, but if you're in any deck, any deck where you don't want your commander to be targeted, which is like every deck, okay, except the Shroud, which of course people have run into problems with, can be issues there. I would say in a Voltron strategy, it's actually not great because you can get into a situation where your commander can't be equipped with other stuff. In any other strategy though, if you're not in a Voltron strategy, just have a commander you don't want targeted, this is probably one of the best ways to do it. And the format and colorless option also gives the haste. So now if I have a commander that I want to attack with right away, it's great there as well. I can also attack, slide it over for free on the next main phase to another creature or something like that, right? That's obviously great. I don't need to talk about why it's great. This is a card, though, that is, to me, yes, very specifically, if I have a commander that I both don't want to get targeted, which is most commanders, and also want to attack with right away, I probably would find room for this, but that's it. This is a card that, back in the day, again, it was another one of those cards that you just put in every deck, because why wouldn't you? It's giving you so much advantage for so little cost. And now unless it is synergistic, right? More and more of these good stuff cards or win more cards I'm taking out of my deck for that reason. And again, for me, when I say good stuff, what I mean is a card that's just good in any commander deck, doesn't necessarily fit the strategy of what I'm doing. And of course, not wanting your commander to get targeted, yeah, that fits every strategy, but it doesn't really fit a strategy, right? Unless I really want to be attacking with my commander immediately, I'm not going to find room for this card anymore. I have been taking, I think I don't have this in any decks anymore. I've taken out of all my decks. And, you know, I'll briefly talk about Roaming Throne, which, you know, I know people will go, Roaming Throne, Lightning Greaves, what? Those have nothing to do with each other. They kind of do. They're a colorless card that can very easily slot into any deck. And a lot of people have already said that about Roaming Throne. Okay, well, there's a zillion commanders out there that have a triggered ability, so why wouldn't you play this? Well, why wouldn't you play a Lightning Greaves, right? Why wouldn't you play a Panharmonicon, which I talked about in the last video that I'm taking out of my decks? Why wouldn't you play those cards? Well, because there's just so much more there, right? And I talked about this in the Deck Doctor video, if you watch that I came out with recently, about how for me, cards like that, cards like Roaming Throne, I am saving for the really underwhelming commander. I'm not going to play Roaming Throne in my Ur-Dragon deck, right? You could. I mean, there, I guess you're doing a tribal theme, so, but still, are you going to find room for this? I wouldn't. There's just so much already, like this is generic tribal support, specific tribal support. You have so much with dragons that, yeah, no, I wouldn't find room for that. I know it's probably great, but I wouldn't find room for it. Just like I probably wouldn't find I took Panharmonicon out of my Tishana. That's an ETB deck. That's where you want to be playing that card, and I took it out of there because I have enough support already. I'm going to put Panharmonicon in a commander deck where I have a really underwhelming commander that desperately needs the help, and I'm going to put Roaming Throne in a commander deck where I have a commander with a triggered ability that it really needs the help. It only triggers maybe once each turn or something, or not once each turn, but once only on my turn, on my end step or something. I don't have a lot of other help there. That's where I'm going to play a card like this. It could go in every deck, but I'm not going to put it in there, right? Just like the new, you know, what's the white card that gives you triple tokens, right? That's not going in my Benny Brax deck, right? That's where you're looking and you're thinking, okay, well, that's an auto include there, right? Because that's all you're doing is making tokens. No, I'm not putting it in there. I don't need it. I already have enough token makers, and I already have Anointed Procession in there, which I'm also considering taking out. And I know, again, people think that's crazy, but I have lots of stuff I can do in there. I don't want to create more tokens. My commander triggers, and for anyone else who has a Benny Brax deck, I will make the case for not putting those cards in there. My commander triggers if I make a token. I don't need to make 20. All I need to do is make one. So making more tokens is good value, sure, but I don't need to. There's already enough stuff in there that can, I mean, mono white tokens, I don't know how many cards fit that theme, but trust me, there's a lot. I've had to shuffle a lot of cards around. And again, just from the last set alone, there's so many cards that I'm trying to fit in there that I'm not going to find room for a guy that makes triple tokens. And again, I might even take my Anointed Procession out because I don't think I have room for that anymore either. So again, a lot of this is the good stuff, do more or win more cards that I'm going to find room for them if my commander is struggling or if I'm in a really underwhelming tribe, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to find room for it. Like, I know people are saying, oh, this is going to go on every deck. I don't think it is. I think, again, this is another Harmonic Prodigy situation, right? That's what I thought about Harmonic Prodigy. That was my number one card. And I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but this is important. That was my number one card from Modern Horizons 2, which is crazy to think about because that was a really good commander set. Really good. And I had that card at number one because that was my thinking. Well, this is just going to go in every deck that you have a wizard or a shaman as your commander that has a triggered ability, which there are lots. Nope, didn't happen. Didn't happen. Even Niv Mizzet Perun, which has two really, really good triggered abilities, Harmonic Prodigy should be an auto include in that deck. And it's not. People are not even putting it in that deck. So why would they put this in every deck, right? Again, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but it fits the theme of there's so much to choose from now that, you know, I'm just doing more of the same thing, or the win more stuff is even though it seems it is good and it could go in every deck, I don't know if it necessarily is. Moving on to a little bit of a different topic, Vandal Blast is a card that I just took out of a deck, and I know it's shocking. I'm the removal guy, right? I'm taking Vandal Blast out. What's going on here? Yeah, we've actually reached that point. And I'm not saying I take this out of all my decks, but this, for a long time on my channel, I say it. I've said it many times on my channel. I've said it in my Deck Doctor videos. If you're playing a red deck, this goes in. If you're playing a 5-color red deck, I would still put Vandal Blast in. Nope, I don't think so anymore. I think we have gotten, and I'm going to talk about removal pretty much. Funny enough, pretty much all the cards I'm going to be talking about are removal. And again, it's power creep. It's a lot of things. We've gotten to a point where with removal, and for me, as I will talk about with a lot of these other cards, I've talked about in the past in my removal video and a lot of other videos, in a commander game, I prefer the card that hits everything. And this only hits artifacts. I still think this is a great card. I still have it in my mono red Browlin deck because I would still play this in a mono red deck. It can be a blowout. I would say 90% of the time that I cast this card recently, it's 1 red mana, I destroy an artifact. It's just someone has an artifact on the table, like a Lightning Greaves that I want, or a Panharmonicon, and I get rid of it with my Vandal Blast before they have a chance to get going with it or get using it. It's been a long time since I've actually cast this for the Overload. I don't know if, like, I'll tell you what is going to the wayside is equipment decks. I don't see them nearly as much anymore. I don't know if just artifact in general is going to the wayside. Apparently everyone likes the Urza, the Esper Urza. So maybe you should keep it in your deck for that. I never see that commander myself. So like the last half a dozen times this card was in my hand, it was just okay. It was just destroy target artifact. That's it. So I actually took it. I can't even remember the deck it was, but I was trying to find room. It was not a monocolored deck. It was like 2 colors. And I was trying to find room. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take out Vandal Blast. I have so much other great removal. Just the board wipes, too, that are destroying artifacts that even though this is one-sided, man, there are better options, I think. It's still a great card. Again, all these cards are great. I'm not saying they're not. I'm giving the specific reasons why I am taking them out of my decks right now. Another long time commander staple, maybe like OG commander staple, Nev's Disc. That's right, Nevinril's Disc, which is, I mean, it's been a commander staple forever because it's just a great board wipe. It also is a colorless option. Again, I have a few colorless options on this list for that reason, where these cards were just played because they were just great options for getting stuff off the board. And if you were in a mono green deck where I used to have this in my Questing Beast deck, you know, you can deal with artifacts and enchantments easily enough. Creatures, not so much. So this was a great creature board wipe in a mono green deck. Now, we haven't gotten a lot of great mono green, that part hasn't changed, and I hope it never does. I don't want to see any mono green board wipes. Please don't. Green doesn't need the help, obviously, right? Or even spot removal for creatures in green. I took this out though because, again, just with what this card is doing, I think there's better options. Just the colorless artifact that is wiping the board, right? Oblivion Stone being probably the best example. That's also, and for me, I would probably play Oblivion Stone over this, I think. Because Oblivion Stone gets everything. I always used to, I didn't love Nev's Disc before because it didn't hit Planeswalkers. One of the reasons I don't love Planeswalkers is because these old cards don't include them as a card type. This also doesn't include battles. I guess we got that there as well, right? Whereas an Oblivion Stone will hit that. Perilous Vault, right? All those things that destroy or exile non-land permanents, right? So this is skipping over those things. It's a minor, it's a minor grievance that I'm being a little nitpicky, but if I was to pick a card to put in my deck, Oblivion Stone or Nev's Disc, I would probably take Oblivion Stone over this. It also has the opportunity to save some of your stuff, which again, I like the stuff that can advantage you, even if you're not doing it. And also this enters the battlefield tapped, and I'm sure we've all seen the Nev Disc come down and get destroyed before it can get used, right? Which is not great either. If you are doing the Darksteel Forge combo, that's where this is good because it doesn't sacrifice itself, right? If you got a Darksteel Forge out or some other, shenanigans, you can just repeatedly do this. Had that happen to me in a game recently. It's still good there. It's still good. But again, there's just so many options. Just in colorless, there are so many great options for this. Karn Silex, they're different. It depends on what you want to be doing. The Moment is one that just came out in Doctor Who that I wanted to try this card out. Is this better than Nev's Disc? Maybe not, right? But at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a time counter on it. Untap target creature you control, it phases out. So again, that it's doing the Oblivion Stone where I get to save something of mine. And you're going to destroy each non-land permanent with mana value less than or equal to the number. So you're probably not going to be using it for a while. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe Nev's Disc is better than this. But I just like the neat things you can do here rather than just, blow up everything. I guess also it's a little boring in a commander game. Here, I can do some neat things. I can phase out my creature. I can pick the mana values I want to go after. So replace this with my Nevs disc. Maybe that's a silly decision, but I wanted to give it a try and see how it works out in a commander game. But again, there's lots of different options there, so not really necessary anymore. You know, I'm not that desperate for a colorless board wipe option, I guess. So I have taken, again, I'm pretty sure I no longer have this in any decks. All right, moving on. Fateful Absence I talked about already, I think in the last video, about how, I think I touched on it, how I'm taking out of, and this, I'm going to cover a lot here. Basically the back half of this video is going to be covering white removal. This was already a card that I was taking out of my decks. And again, this is going to touch on the power creep thing quite a bit. When this card came out in Midnight Hunt, which was, what, 2 years ago? This, again, was my #1 card from that set. I'm like, that's a phenomenal removal spell. 2 mana, instant speed, destroy a creature or a planeswalker, and then the player gets to investigate. Who cares, right? Also, it has that Path to Exile effect where I can use it on myself. If I desperately need to, I can destroy a token creature of mine to create a clue, and then I get to draw a card. Not great, but it is an opportunity. You know, it is a possibility, and I like having that kind of stuff on cards. I loved this card when it first came out. And I guess I'll give a shout to Infernal Grasp too, because that was, I think, my #2 card from that set. Both those guys came out in the same set, and I'm like, okay, here's 2 of the best removal spells in the entire format now in the same set. Wow. Infernal Grasp is, I'm still playing it, but it's definitely getting pushed out. And it's crazy to think, again, a 2 mana spell that can destroy any creature. No stipulation at all. I just lose some life. And again, we just got more cards. This year alone, we've gotten a couple of really great mono black options that maybe are pushing Infernal Grasp out. Fateful Absence is just gone. I maybe have this in my Denic deck still, only because it creates a clue. Maybe. Again, because in that deck, I can use it on myself. And funny enough, I actually sometimes want to kill my own, like I can kill my own commander with it, which is funny. I've done that before because I want my commander to die. So I can shoot my own commander, have it go to the graveyard, which is what I want, and then create a clue token, which is also good, right? So it actually does work there. Again, the synergy's there, but I still might end up taking it out because, of course, Get Lost, which just came out in Caverns of Ixalan, is just a strict upgrade, I think. Again, as I talked about in my best cards from that set, you're destroying a creature and a planeswalker and giving your opponent 2 map tokens, which I think is worse than giving a clue token. I think giving a clue token is better. As people have pointed out, if your opponent doesn't have any creatures, it doesn't even, the map tokens are worthless. They don't even do anything. You can't use them unless you have a creature. But the big one is that it destroys enchantments. And as I said a lot, like, first of all, I want versatile removal. So this is more versatile. It hits 3 things instead of 2. But more to the point, if this was destroy target creature, artifact, or planeswalker, it's better than Fateful Absence. But the fact that it hits enchantments is just, for me, again, as I say all the time, that's the #1 thing that I'm looking for in my removal now. The Smothering Tithe, which is just super powerful, or the Rhystic Study, super powerful, or the Necropotence. Just think of the really, really powerful enchantments I got to get off the table immediately. Or, and I realize there are creatures and artifacts too, but I think there's more in the enchantment sphere, right? In the enchantment sphere, you also have the I'm getting hosed by that Rest in Peace, or I'm getting hosed by that Stranglehold. There's also those. There's also the Dream Tides. I don't know, whatever. There's so many enchantments that will just lock you out of a game that you have to get off the table as well. So, like, this isn't just, in my opinion, this isn't just a little bit better than Fateful Absence. It's miles better than Fateful Absence because it hits an enchantment. It's, in my opinion, one of the best white removal spells in the format now. For me, if I had to pick a best removal spell in the entire format, Generous Gift. Because it hits lands and has no stipulation at all, just gives your opponent a 3/3 token. Who cares? 3 mana is, that's not bad. I'm okay with it. The one issue that I'm running into now is, okay, I got that, and then I got Stroke of Midnight. So that's another great hit any target except lands for 3 mana. And then I got Excise the Imperfect, which is another one. Again, we are with there's more and more and more and more. That one doesn't hit lands, but it exiles. But they're all 3 mana, so it's like, okay, do I want to put all 3 of those in the deck? Maybe I want Get Lost instead. This is the situation where I'm like, okay, I'm going to put Get Lost in instead of, Stroke of Midnight, and then I get into the situation where my opponent has an Acromas Memorial or something, and I can't get it off the table, and now do I ever feel like an idiot? But it might be, having another removal spell in the 2 slot might be important as well. Not only is it a strict upgrade, where, okay, can I even play Fateful Absence anymore unless I specifically, it fits my Denic deck because I'm doing a clue theme there. But also the other options, Stroke of Midnight and all these other options as well, is getting to the point where I'm pushing stuff out. The same is happening with the white board wipes as well. Ravnica at War is another card that for me, I'm like, okay, that seems like an auto include in a mono white deck. Doesn't it? Exile all multicolored permanents. So if I'm in a mono white deck, zero downside for me. It exiles. It's going to hit my opponents. It just seemed like such a slam dunk. I took this out of my Patron of the Kitsune deck recently because for a couple of reasons. Again, better replace. We just, every set, there's a new fantastic board wipe. So it's very easy for me to find one that fits. Reason number two, this actually doesn't hit that much. You know, I haven't had a lot of blowouts with this. I have way more blowouts with an austere command or something like that. This is actually, you know, usually you'll hit like 3 or 4 things. I mean, yeah, it doesn't hurt me at all, but I'm actually not hurting my opponents that much. Again, they get to keep their Rhystic Study. They get to keep their Smothering Tithe. They get to keep their Vorinclex. They get to keep their Avacyn. And again, that doesn't feel good. They get to keep all their artifacts. That doesn't feel great when I cast this and I'm actually only hitting 3 or 4 things. And then on top of that, I have ran into the situation. It's only happened once, but I have ran into the situation where everyone in the game was playing a monocolored deck and this is just a dead draw, right? It doesn't do anything. So for me, there's no reason to play this. And there's so many great white board wipes. We get a great one at least one every single set. So it's an embarrassment of riches where, yeah, Ravnica War, man, that looks really good. But to be honest, I don't know if it's ever performed phenomenally for me, but there's just better options now anyway. So I'm not going to play it. It's coming out of all my decks. And again, the white removal situation has gotten so ridiculous that I am now considering taking swords out of my decks. That's right. This is I mean, talk about a commander staple, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure it is the most popular card in the entire format outside of Sol Ring and Arcane Signet, which don't really count. Okay, when I'm talking about the most popular cards in the format, I don't usually consider Sol Ring and Arcane Signet. So if you don't include them, this is the most popular card in the entire format. It is the most efficient creature removal spell ever printed in Magic, I think, but it is just creature removal. A lot of people would consider this to be the best removal spell in the format, which I think is nuts. I mean, it only hits creatures, so how could you possibly call it the best removal spell? For me, I'm at the point now, again, with the Stroke of Midnight and the Get Lost and all these great targeted, you know, again, we have the board wipes as well. I'm going to have to do some reevaluating here. Again, and by the way, I'm just talking about my mono white decks. I have 2 mono white decks and both of them I'm like, do I want a card? Like it costs 1 mana. That's great. You know, and it's kind of nice to leave the 1 mana open. I talk about this in my 3 tips for playing your commander decks. I think how leaving that 1 white mana open is great. My patrons all the time. Oh, Demo's got 1 white mana open. Better not attack him. Because they think you have a swords in your hand. But guess what? If you took swords out of your deck, they still think you have a swords in your hand. So you can still do that. You can still bluff your opponents, even if you don't have a swords or a Path to Exile, right? And again, Path to Exile, it all fits into the same thing here. Both of those cards, the best, most efficient targeted removal spell in the history of Magic, those 2. You could debate which one's better. I think actually in a commander game, Path is better because I don't want to, if my opponent's attacking me with the Blightsteel Colossus, I'd rather give them a land than you know, 11 life. That's just me. You can still leave the white mana open. Your opponents don't know you don't have that card in your hand, and they don't know you don't have it in your deck, so that still works. It is nice. It's really nice to pass turn with 1 mana open and have that swords or path in your hand and know that not just the attacking scenario, but my opponent plays a Vorinclex, I have that answer in hand. I can just 1 white mana before my untap, I can get it off the board, so all my stuff untaps, right? That's nice. And I don't want to have to leave 3 mana up for that Stroke of Midnight, or maybe even that 2 mana for the Get Lost, you know, so that it's tough. What do you do, right? But again, I'm getting to the point now where even in a mono white deck, I have Generous Gift, that's my number 1 choice. Then maybe Excise the Imperfect, Stroke of Midnight, Get Lost, Path, Swords. That's just the targeted removal. I mean, I guess that's a lot of removal. That's pretty good. Plus my board wipes, right? Again, I already talked to, like, Fateful Absence, gone. No chance I'm finding room for that. Return to Dust is another one I talked about in the last video where it's like, okay, a removal spell that only hits artifacts and enchantments in white? No way, no way. And Heliod's Intervention is a one I really like a lot. And again, you can gain life there. So for that reason, I'd probably always leave that in my Patron of the Kitsune deck because it fits the life gain theme. But man, it's going to be tough finding room for that in other places because just X target artifacts and enchantments. I mean, it is instant speed. You know, later in the game, it can be a real blowout. Again, there's another card where if I'm in a white-red deck, I think I probably prefer that over Vandal Blast. And in fact, that's probably the deck I took it out of. I think I took it out of my Lulu deck for play because I'm like, I got Healin's Intervention. I think I'm good. That hits enchantments as well, right? If I'm in a white-red deck, do I want a card that only hits artifacts? Don't I want a card that hits artifacts and enchantments because I can do that really well, right? Same if I'm in a red-green deck. If I'm in a red-green deck, do I want to play a card that only hits artifacts? Because I can hit artifacts and enchantments really, really easily. I can hit both, right? So versatility and you know, what situation are you going to be involved in? You want it to benefit you. Of course, Vandal Blast, you know, I'm getting back on a Vandal Blast here. Vandal Blast benefits you, which is great, but how often are you going to be doing that? You know, and for me, with the removal especially, it is getting really, really tough to figure out what am I going to be putting in my decks. Wrapping this all up, okay, and there's some serious Commander staples in this video that I've been taking out of my decks. Swords to Plowshares, arguably the best removal spell. I mean, I don't think, but a lot of other people think that it is the best removal spell in the entire format. It is, again, outside of Mana Rocks, the most popular card in the entire format, and it is probably the best creature removal spell in the history of the game. I am seriously considering starting to take it out of my decks. That's where I'm at. Am I crazy for doing that? Perhaps. That's where we're at, though. Again, the power creep, it's a combination of power creep and just better options and more options, and I gotta find room in my deck with a lot of these cards where, okay, here's a card that works really good in my deck. It's doing removal, but it's also synergistic, or it's doing something that I need in my deck, like card draw or whatever, but it's also synergistic. So I'm gonna replace that with the card that the Commander staple that I've been playing for so many years, right? So that's sort of the situation we're at right now. So you guys let me know, what are the Commander staples that you've been taking out of your deck recently? Are you taking, are you replacing with the very obvious power creep we just got in the last set? Are you taking some cards out of your deck for that reason? I think you probably are. You guys let me know in the comments below. That's it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.